the federal government started to transition, many people with mental illness, away from the hospitals back into the communities.
Yes.
And here in the Metro New York area, since it's so dense, you encounter many people on a daily basis, for whatever reason that they have mental illness, whether they were in the military, maybe, they had some infraction since they were a child, whatever the case may be, you have a one-on-one, whether it's in the subway, in the streets, you run into people on a constant basis that are suffering from mental illness. Why therapy, and what does it encompass?
Why not therapy?
There it is. That must be your tagline.
It's not. Actually, I think
that must be your tagline.
That's the first time I said that. Why not therapy?
You put that on the back of your car.
I know. I need to say that.
How would you define mental illness and mental wellness?
And so mental illness, so in my world, I think of a diagnosis. There's someone that comes in, let's say, or a family member might, I'm going to bring my sister in, hypothetically. And my sister's, she's hearing voices, she's seeing things, she's a little bit paranoid, all of these things. And something's just not quite right. There's a concern there. And so with that, if you were to bring a person in and they were to be assessed, just because that's happening, they may or they may not. And so if there is a mental, if there's a diagnosis that we term mental illness, it could be something as just as what I just said, schizophrenia, schizophreniform, I don't want to get too technical here, or even bipolar, the manic, the depressions, the highs and the lows of what that's about. And then there's also just depression and anxiety, which is underlying and which is kind of a root cause of a lot of those things. Talk to somebody, reach out, because people know people. Oftentimes it's like, well, you know what, Andrea, I want to go see a therapist. Do you happen to know anyone? Or I need to go talk to somebody. And oftentimes, therapy is just talk. Now, there are different types. There are psychiatrists, which are medical doctors. And so if I am having a serious mental illness, I will go to a psychiatrist and I might be prescribed medication, right? And so that might help with my depression, my anxiety, or other symptoms that I might, and there are people that sometimes need to be on medication. That's a psychiatrist. And then there are psychologists and psychotherapists, such as myself. We're not medical doctors. We don't prescribe medication, but what we do is the most important thing is talk therapy. And it's just a conversation, kind of like what you and I are having. The most important thing within that is to find the fit. It's like, I say, like with women, you find a shoe, and you're like, oh, that shoe is beautiful and it looks so good, but I put it on and it just does not fit. And if that's the case, so once you try it on and if it's not a good fit, look at the next shoe, go try the next therapist. A lot of companies have wellness programs or what they call employee assistance programs. And so, for my over 20 years of this work, it's often underutilized. And I don't know why, because it's a benefit that is being provided by the employer. And so like when you suggested to your colleague, hey, you should reach out to the wellness or call that 800 number. What's nice is employers will offer sometimes 3 sessions or 5 sessions or 8 sessions, at no cost to the person, and I always say, look, it's a way to just kind of go in and talk to somebody, on your employer's dime. And, it's kind of like you could test it out, and so if you go and you're like, you see Michelle for a couple of sessions, you're like, Michelle's cool, but that's, not a good fit. You can go see David or John or someone else. The difference with the internet, I think, unlike before, is I'm home at my computer and I can just sit here and just type and put anything and say anything out there, and it's out there in a split second. Whether you tweet or what, Instagram, or so whether you're saying something about someone or someone reads something and then they interpret it as some kind of way. I know I have some clients that do comparisons, like, oh my goodness, look at their life. They're over in the islands and they're doing this and they have just the perfect life. And I'm like, you're seeing a millisecond, of a snapshot. And now all of a sudden you deduct it and you come to this conclusion that, what's going on with you, that all of a sudden, their life's great, your life, it sucks, per se.
I'm sorry I didn't touch on it earlier, where people that are incarcerated are coming out of being incarcerated. Do the county jails and the state prisons, federal prisons, they all have therapists on staff?
I would hope so.
Okay.
I would hope so. I think that it is, when we talk about essential, I think that's essential.
The mayor started to really promote that wellness and that 800 line that they create that safe space for officers to go and speak to someone.
Yeah.
And I said, that's great, but the weird thing is that the people don't have that. And when the officers go out and interact with that person, and let's say there is a negative interaction, I was wondering at some point that maybe the police department would finally see that they need maybe therapists, psychologists going out on these calls with them. Yes. Because they're going out into situations where they should maybe, unless it's even if it's an armed person, if you have SWAT that comes out and they're trying to talk somebody out. But if it's an unarmed person, for that matter of fact, which many cases that, as a person outside of the police department that I see that are reported all the time, and I said, it's just, the irony is so strange that all of a sudden it's very important for the city to really focus and talk about it, and the media for that fact, because they're bringing it up just as well. That's and right. Not noticing that that's what these officers are of the community as well, that they should notice that that's what people are having. They're having these very same issues. And when you're having this interaction, if things go the wrong way, the next thing you know, the person's dead. Or shot, for that fact.
That's right. Well, just like you said they should. And I think that's the operative word. Because when they're back in their role as an officer on the street in front of, a situation, an individual, sometimes they're, remember they have their training and of course, I don't know all about in terms of law enforcement and just in what I've seen, and some of in terms of meetings and professional work that I've done. But you're absolutely right. I know that there was, and I'm not sure where it's going, because I know that there have been talks where social workers and psychologists team up with officers to go out together. I mean, I think that's an ideal world, because one thing, there could be a crime or a criminal element, but then there also could be a mental health element. And so, as opposed to just the reactionary in all of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely think that could be the best of two worlds. And so what does that look like? What does the funding look like? I don't know. That's, bigger than me. But I think that it definitely would be helpful, because if officers do need it in terms of all of what they're seeing, because each time there is an interaction of some sort, remember, that could be definitely trauma to the person.
Yes.
And then also trauma to the officer. And when they are from situation day in and day out, over and over and over. And so what happens is there are all these traumas that are built up, And then what happens is, where does it go? It just all sits within and it stays within. And so what happens is, when you hear, when people say, I'm about to have a nervous breakdown, or, that person is so angry or so intense, or, you know what I'm talking about.
Correct. No, absolutely. When we hear, about defunding the police, I think people really don't look at these scenarios of not defunding, but reallocating resources for things such as, mental illness, mental wellness, and having, a therapist, a psychologist there to work in many capacities. I can use Los Angeles as a great example. If there is a car accident, yes, the police come, and so do the fire and EMS. They come together. And so if you have a scenario where you believe that, let's say a mother calls and says, John is off his meds and he's going crazy, well, right away, then it should be, yes, the emergency services, police, but most importantly, you should have somebody going to speak to him on the situation of his mental wellness. That should be the very first thing.
That's what I think. I agree.